Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ali and I'm a crafter, small business owner and YouTuber. In today's video I'm going to show you how to make 4 very different cards using one stamp. This is quite a long video, so if you haven't got a drink already I would go and grab one. I've poured myself a gin because it's Sunday evening and why not? We're using this stamp from Paper Mania today. This is from their Sweet Treats collection and it's 4x4 inch stamp, so it's pretty big. So the first technique we're going to do today is heat embossing on vellum. I'm starting out with a sheet of Winsor & Newton watercolour paper, which I'm going to cut down to 5 by 7 inches. I quite often don't really do accurate measurements when I'm card making, but this time I did. And I'm using some vellum. Mine is from Saustrian Green, but you can use any vellum that you like. Thicker vellum is better for this technique, and you'll see in a little bit why that is. So I'm trimming that down to be slightly larger than my card panel, so I can fold the sides around the back and hide any adhesive on the card. Next I'm grabbing my Dovecraft Messy Mat, which is fantastic for anything that makes a mess, and also it protects your surface from heat. I've got my Tim Holtz stamp positioning tool and I am stamping with Versamark ink, and then I'm going to heat emboss this with Wow opaque white embossing powder. When you're heat embossing on vellum you really need to make sure you don't hold the heat gun against the vellum for too long because it is prone to warping. Mine did warp because I am impatient and I probably should have used a thicker sheet of vellum, but to be honest it's a handmade card, it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't matter. So, you know, as Bob Ross would say, they are all happy little accidents, there are no mistakes when you're making a card. I am now folding a really nice sharp crease so I can fold one side of my vellum piece around the back of my card and then sticking it down with some tape to hold it in place. I'm now going to do a little bit of watercolouring. I'm using the Prima Marketing Pastel Dreams palette, which is a really nice watercolour palette. If you haven't tried anything from this range, I can really recommend it. I really like it. You can probably see where I went wrong here. I kept getting the watercolour all over my vellum sheet, so you have to be quite careful to not do that. I'm not sure how else I would have done it. And in the end, you know, the card looked fine in the end, so everything's a learning process. I'm using one of the brown shades for the biscuits, and then I've used a little bit of the pink to stand in for the jam on a jammy dodger. I love jammy dodgers. Actually I love all kinds of biscuits. All biscuits are created equal apart from bourbons, which are just universally awful, wouldn't you agree? I've finished doing all my painting now, so I folded the other side of the vellum background and stuck it on the back of the card, and then I'm using red line tape to adhere it to the front of my card. I'm not really sure why I decided to use red line tape. I guess I just really wanted it to stick. So there we go, that's that done. That's the front of my card. It's the same size as my card base. I'm using this AliExpress stamp set to do my sentiment, along with VersaFine ink. I really like VersaFine ink for all my sentiments. It always comes out really nicely. I think I use Vintage Sepia for this, which is one of my most used colours, along with Onyx Black. I'm then die cutting it out with a stitched circle die that was a little bit bigger. This is a die set that I got from AliExpress as well, and then to add a little bit more interest I'm going to use some distress ink around the edge of the circle just to make it pop off the card a little bit more. I've stuck that on with some foam squares. I clearly decided it wasn't done, so I added some Dovecraft glitter glue just in a pink colour just to, you know, add a little bit of extra sparkle. We always like a little bit of extra glitter. And that's the first card complete. You can see there's a little bit of warping on my vellum, but to be honest, I'm not mad. I think it looks quite sweet. A little bit of texture on the card, nothing wrong with that. So the next technique we're going to have a look at is stamped paper piecing. I tried this because Jennifer Maguire showed it on one of her videos. I'm using a paper pad that I got from the works, and then along with a Paper Addicts one of these little mini ones are really useful for small things like this, and I am stamping the little heart in the middle of the jammy dodger using Memento dewdrop inks. The dewdrop ink's actually really helpful for this technique because they're really small, so you can get into a small area. So first I've stamped all the hearts, and now I'm going to use Memento ink in a brown shade to do the actual cookie. So I'm stamping this on the brown cardstock. So So I've done 6 of each. Don't actually need 6, but you know, always do extra. And then I need to fussy cut all of these out. So I'm using my super sharp scissors to do this. So first I'm going to cut out all of the hearts, and then after that I will cut out all of the biscuits as well, so you can kind of see what it's going to look like. I do a lot of fussy cutting when I do my card making. I don't know why. I find it quite therapeutic. I know a lot of people don't like doing that, so maybe this technique is not for you. This is quite a simple stamp to cut out though, so you know, maybe you could give it a go if you're feeling particularly patient that day. Now I just need to stick all my little hearts onto my biscuits, and then they're ready to go on to the next stage. I'm using a cream cardstock this time instead of white, just, you know, shake it up a bit, and I'm cutting it to 5.5 by 5.5 inches, so there'll be a mat around the edge when I put it on my 6x6 card base. I'm now laying out where I want these to go and using some double-sided tape to stick them down. I'm only going to use 4 for this card, so, but you can see it's not quite covered the card yet, so I'll stick them all down, and then I'll cut off the overhanging pieces off the edge, and then I'll use these overhanging pieces to fill in any gaps on the card, so there's much less wastage if you do it like this. I do this quite often. This is a technique I like to do fairly often, even though there's lots of like snipping bits off. I do quite enjoy it, and I think it looks quite effective when you're finished. So that's that done, and there we go. I've got 2 left for another project. To make my sentiment for this card, I'm going to cut out this Sweet Wishes die, which all my dies are basically from AliExpress, so this one's also from AliExpress, and I'm going to cut it 4 times from, oh no, okay, it is 3. I've cut this 3 times from white cardstock, and then I'm going to glue these all together just to make it a bit more sturdy. And there it is, it's finished, it's nice and thick. And now I'm going to heat emboss this with a translucent pink embossing powder and my Versamark ink, and instead of using a coffee filter like I normally do, I stupidly poured it all over my Dovecraft messy mat, and it was almost impossible to get off, so don't do that. Do as I say, not as I do. I did manage to clean it up, but this silicone mat doesn't, you know, it's great for non-stick unless the non-stick is tiny little pieces of powder, so don't do that. And now I'm going to heat set that with my heat gun, and I'm using a heat-proof mat underneath so I don't ruin my table. I decided it needed another layer, so I added another layer of Versamark and embossing powder and then heat set it again. You can see that it's kind of come away from the edge of the die cut, but I quite like it. I think it's interesting, you know, it doesn't detract from the final look. So now I am folding my card base. I usually just use pre-made card bases because I'm very lazy. This one is a Dovecraft one, and then I'm going to stick my card panel on top, and then last of all I'm going to add my die cut sentiment in the middle, and that is that card finished. Ta-da! All done. This one is a really easy one to put together, and if you're not into colouring, this is perfect because it's just stamping, cutting and sticking. So next technique we're going to do is partial colouring. Again, if you don't want to do loads of colouring, this is great. I'm using the A4 Ultra Smooth card from Dovecraft for this, which is my favourite card to do stamping on, especially when I'm using alcohol markers. I'm going to use an acrylic block for this one because you really don't need a stamping positioning tool in your craft room if you don't want to spend out on one. An acrylic block will let you do lots and lots of techniques, just like this one. So I'm going to stamp this multiple times on my cardstock, overhanging the edge just so it's covered, and I'm using Memento ink again, which is a alcohol marker safe ink, so I can colour it with my alcohol markers when I'm finished. On this side of the card I didn't actually stamp it very well, so next thing I do is go and cut off a little sliver of the card so you can't tell where I made a mistake, using my favourite Tim Holtz trimmer. Now I'm going to use another circle die and cut a piece out of the middle here, slightly on the left. This isn't a stitch die, this is just a regular circle die, so pop that in my Sizzix Big Shot, which is my very trusty die cutting machine. Fantastic little thing. Well, it's not exactly little, is it? But it really does the job. I really like it. And then I'm going to take this off. I tape this down using my masking tape, but this is not the best masking tape. This is like builder's masking tape that I stole from my boyfriend's toolbox. So maybe don't use that. Maybe use purple tape, but this is what I have on my desk. And maybe one day I will learn to not use that all the time, but today it's not that day. Now I'm going to choose my alcohol marker colours. I have a lot of different alcohol marker sets from a few different brands, so I have this swatch book where I can pick and choose what they look like. So I'm using some from Tiger, some from Nova, and some from Touch New here, and these are the colours that I'm going to be using. I first am doing the jammy bits with my red, and then after that I'm going to move on to the background, which I decided to do in blue because it was a good contrast with the red, and also I was going to do a blue card. So I'm laying down flat areas of colour, then adding the shadow, and then going back with the lighter colour to blend it out. I'm not an alcohol marker expert, so if you're going to tell me in the comments that isn't how you colour with alcohol markers, I do know. There's no need to tell me. There is no right or wrong way in craft, in my opinion, and you can just do what you like. So I am not too fussed on this about getting a super perfect blend because the image is quite illustrative anyway. So I'm all about just having fun on this channel. That's what art and craft should be, in my opinion. So we're nearly finished colouring now. This is pretty much all done. Don't forget when you use alcohol markers to use a matte underneath, because they always seep through, and you don't want you to ruin your work surface, because I've done that many times before. And there we go. Now it looks like I only coloured that piece on purpose instead of being super lazy. I'm going to use the Tonic Studios classic card to make my card base for this. I really like this card because it is textured. It's really nice for stamping on as well. It looks very classy. And then I am cutting that into a slimline card and scoring it halfway, so to make the fold. And I did measure this. I don't exactly know what the measurements were though, so sorry about that. I'm now die cutting the sentiment. I'm going to use that red pattern paper that I was using earlier, use a scrap of that and then some white. This die is from AliExpress and it comes with the shadow as well as the letters, which is really nice. I really like when word dies have the shadow die as well because it gives you a bit more versatility. And then I'm going to glue the letters onto the shadow, and then this will just give it a bit of a lift on the card so you can still read it even though the background is quite busy on this design. Now I'm going to cut some craft foam to go under my coloured jammy dodger piece just to lift it off the card a little bit and give it a little bit more dimension, and I'm going to stick the background down on my card base so I can finish it off with double-sided tape again, which is my favourite. Me and glue do not get on very well. I've used it quite a bit in this video. It's very unusual for me to do that. I'm using red line tape on my foam piece because I find that craft foam, especially when you glue it, sometimes it just falls off, so I've decided to switch to using red line tape and I haven't had a problem with that. Stick that down there in the middle in the gap. That's looking lovely. And now I also need to add a bit of craft foam onto my sentiment. Half of it is at the same height as the raised piece of the card, and then half of it is at the same height as the card. So I need to make sure it's balanced, otherwise it will go all saggy in the middle. And nobody wants a saggy middle, do they? So I'm using my red line tape again to make sure that it doesn't fall off, and popping it on there, and then we are done. Lovely stuff. And that is card number 3. I really like this one. It's really minimal, but it looks really effective, I think. So yeah, definitely could probably do this one again. The last technique we're going to look at today is masking and colouring. I'm going to use some of my favourite, I know I said all the paper's my favourite, but this is the Daler Rowney mixed media paper that I got from Hobbycraft. It's really, really good for both painting and coloured pencils because it's got a really nice tooth to it. I really like using paper with a bit more tooth when I use coloured pencils. I'm using this stamp set that I got from AliExpress, which is donut themed, and the sentiment is cookies make everything better, which is true. I mean, if you don't agree with that, then you probably won't like this channel. And you certainly won't like me. Oh. And because it's a pigment ink, I'm gonna heat set it with my heat gun, and just to make sure that it doesn't smudge. And then I'm gonna use my masking tape to just mask that off so I can stamp over the top. This time I did actually stick that on my hand and peel it off a few times so it removes some of the stick, so maybe I am learning. Now I'm going to stamp the Jammy Dodger stamp over the top, and I'm using VersaFine again because it will then match my sentiment. And because I'm using coloured pencils, I don't need to use an alcohol marker safe ink this time. I'm going to use my Faber-Castell Polychromos, which are in the most beautiful tin. It's one of my favourite purchases from this year. I really love these pencils. They're so nice. They are expensive, and I think this set retails on their site for about £110, which is absolutely insane for a box of pencils. But I got it off Amazon on a Amazon Prime deal for about 45 quid. For this big tin is a really good deal, so I was very pleased with that, and they are really nice pencils, so I can highly recommend them. I'm doing the colouring now with a bunch of different shades from this set. I've done the jam, and now I'm doing all the biscuit, the main biscuit piece. Again, I'm not an expert with coloured pencils. I have been practicing with them, but you know, I'm not a professional artist. But I really like the texture that coloured pencils gives your colouring. So, and then I'm just going to go over with a layer of yellow just to make it a bit more Jammy Dodger toned, which do have a bit more of a yellow tone, so it's kind of lightened it and blended the colours together. I'm quite pleased with this. You will notice I smudged the ink, and in comes the handy mono sand eraser, which is fantastic if you make mistakes because you can just sand it off the paper and it's like it never happened, which is the best kind of mistake, isn't it? I'm going to peel away this masking tape, and that is most of the card done. The last thing I'm going to do, once I've stuck it onto my card base, which is another 5x7 card from one of the Dovecraft mega sets that they make, is add some sequins. So I've got these sequins from AliExpress in 2 different shades of pink, and now I'm going to spend absolutely ages putting them on the card in a way that looks like they just fell on there randomly. Does anybody else struggle with this? This probably took me about 5 minutes just to get them all in the right place, and then I had to stick them all down. You'd think it would be easy to make them look like they're random, but it's not. I find it really difficult. Sometimes I just give up, but this time no, I persevered, and I'm really pleased. I really like the way that they are like trailing across the card. So that's the last card for today. I hope you enjoyed seeing all the techniques, and I hope I taught you something. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and comment down below and tell me which card was your favourite, because I'd love to hear that. And please consider subscribing to my channel for more videos like this. I hope to see you back here again soon. Bye!